The air in the old Victorian house hung heavy, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten memories. Sunlight, fractured by the grime on the tall windows, cast long, dancing shadows across the worn Persian rug in the study. Evelyn traced the faded floral pattern with her fingertip, a sigh escaping her lips. It had been 6 months since her father, Arthur Blackwood, a man as formidable and enigmatic in life as he now was in death, had passed away. The initial shock had dulled into a persistent ache, a hollow echo in the vast emptiness he had left behind. The reading of the will had been a straightforward affair, or so she had thought. The bulk of his considerable estate was to be divided equally between Evelyn and her younger brother, Charles, with a few minor bequests to loyal staff. It was predictable, sensible, very much Arthur. But a seed of unease had been planted that day, a tiny, almost imperceptible discord in the otherwise harmonious proceedings. Mr. Abernathy, the family solicitor, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with polite neutrality, had hesitated for a fraction of a second after concluding the reading, his gaze flicking towards Evelyn with an unreadable expression before returning to his papers. She had dismissed it then as grief-induced hyper-awareness, a tendency to read too much into innocuous gestures. Now, surrounded by her father's belongings, each object a silent testament to a life lived largely in private, the memory of that fleeting moment resurfaced with unsettling clarity. Arthur Blackwood was a collector of sorts, not of grand artworks or rare stamps, but of the arcane, the obscure. His study, now her temporary sanctuary as she sorted through his effects, was a testament to this peculiar passion. Shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound volumes with titles in forgotten languages. Strange artifacts gathered from his travels to far-flung corners of the world sat nestled amongst geological specimens and antique scientific instruments. He had always been a man of secrets, a trait Evelyn had both admired and resented. Admired for the air of mystery it lent him, resented for the emotional distance it often created. Her brother, Charles, had been less sentimental, more pragmatic. He had already taken his share of the inherited assets, eager to liquidate what he could and move on. Evelyn understood his desire for closure, but she felt a deep-seated need to connect with the man her father truly was. Beyond the stern facade he often presented to the world. This house, this collection, felt like the last vestiges of that connection. She picked up a heavy, ornately carved wooden box from his desk, its surface smooth and cool beneath her fingers. It was locked, as so many of his things were. Arthur had a penchant for locks, for hidden compartments, for layers of security that seemed excessive even for someone of his wealth. What secrets did these locked boxes hold? What truths lay hidden beneath the surface of his meticulously ordered life? Days turned into weeks as Evelyn painstakingly catalogued and packed her father's belongings. Each object she touched seemed to whisper a fragment of his past, a past she realized she knew surprisingly little about. There were photographs tucked away in drawers, faded images of a younger Arthur standing alongside people she didn't recognize, in places she had never heard him mention. There were letters, tied with ribbon, their delicate script hinting at relationships and events shrouded in mystery. One afternoon, while clearing out his bedside table, Evelyn came across it, a King James Bible, its leather cover worn soft with age and use. It wasn't particularly remarkable. There were several other religious texts scattered throughout the house, but something about this one felt different. It was heavier than it looked, and the pages seemed thicker, almost swollen. Arthur wasn't a particularly religious man, at least not outwardly. He had never taken them to church, and religious discussions were conspicuously absent from their family life. So why this well-worn Bible placed so deliberately by his bedside? Curiosity piqued. Evelyn sat down in the worn armchair by the window, the Bible resting in her lap. She ran her hand over the cover, noticing faint indentations beneath the leather. It felt as if something was pressed between the pages, something substantial. Her heart began to beat a little faster. Could this be it? Could this unassuming book hold a clue, a missing piece of the puzzle that was her father's life? Carefully, she opened the Bible. The pages within were indeed thicker than usual, and as she gently fanned them, she noticed that several had been carefully glued together. A knot of anticipation tightened in her stomach. This was no ordinary Bible. This was a hiding place. With trembling fingers, Evelyn located the seam where the pages were joined. It was along the spine, almost invisible to the casual observer. Using a thin letter opener from her father's desk, she painstakingly began to separate the glued pages. The process was slow and delicate, and she had to be careful not to tear the fragile paper. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the sealed section gave way. Tucked neatly within the hollowed-out space, nestled amongst the thin, brittle pages, was a folded piece of paper. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. With hesitant hands, Evelyn unfolded the paper. It was a single sheet, yellowed with age, covered in her father's familiar, elegant script. At the top of the page, the words "My Second Will and Testament" were clearly written. A wave of dizziness washed over her. A second will? Why would her father have kept a second will hidden, especially in such an unusual place? What did it contain that the first will did not? The questions tumbled through her mind, each one more perplexing than the last. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows in the corners deepening. Evelyn clutched the document in her hand, the weight of its secrets pressing down on her. The straightforward narrative of her father's passing, the seemingly simple division of his estate, had just taken a dark and unexpected turn. The comfortable certainty she had clung to was shattered, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease and a burning desire to uncover the truth hidden within those fragile, yellowed pages. This was not just about inheritance anymore. This was about the man she thought she knew, and the secrets he had kept locked away until his dying breath. The discovery of this hidden will was not an ending, but the beginning of a journey into the unknown. A journey that promised to unravel the carefully constructed facade of Arthur Blackwood's life and reveal the mysteries that lay beneath. The paper in Evelyn's hands trembled. She couldn't take her eyes off the inscription in her father's own hand. "My Second Will and Testament." A dizzying sensation washed over her, and the entire room seemed to tilt. For the past 6 months, she had lived in a state of false peace, built on a foundation she thought was solid. Now that foundation was shaking, threatened by a single, fragile piece of paper that had been kept in secret. She swallowed hard, trying to regain her composure. What could be so important that her father would hide a second will? Why wouldn't he have legally invalidated the first one? And why would he choose such a bizarre hiding place as a worn-out Bible? Evelyn took a deep breath and began to read. Each word, each sentence, seemed to be written in an invisible ink, only to reveal itself as she read, uncovering secrets that had been buried for far too long. First, this second will did not nullify the first one. Instead, it was an addendum, a significant modification, as her father had written. It had nothing to do with money or assets, but with something far more precious and frightening. A house. A house Evelyn had never heard of, located in a remote town called Blackwood Creek, a name she immediately recognized as her family's own. The will stipulated that the house, along with everything inside, would belong solely to Evelyn with one single condition. She had to live there alone for at least 6 months. Charles, her brother, was not allowed to set foot on the property at any time. If she failed to comply, the house would be sold, and the proceeds would be donated to an anonymous charity. Evelyn's heart pounded. Blackwood Creek. The name repeated itself in her mind. It was her grandmother's maiden name, a woman Evelyn only knew from faded photographs and brief, often altered or omitted, stories from her father. Arthur Blackwood rarely spoke about his family, and when he did, he always wore a scowl. Now, a secret will was demanding she return to the roots of a forgotten past. A sudden knock on the door made Evelyn jump. She folded the will, hastily tucking it into her jacket pocket, and tried to manage a normal smile. "Evelyn, are you in there?" Charles's voice echoed from outside. Evelyn opened the door, and Charles stepped in, his face etched with concern. "I knocked and didn't hear you answer. Are you all right? You look pale." Charles was the only one in the family who had their father's blue eyes. He was a successful businessman, a man of numbers, not of mysteries. Now, he stood before her with genuine concern, but Evelyn couldn't help but feel a strange distance between them. "I'm fine," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's just, going through everything here is exhausting." Charles nodded in sympathy, but his eyes were still suspicious. "I was thinking about selling this place," he said, his voice lowering. "It's too big, too full of memories. It would be easier for us to sell it and split the money. What do you think?" Reason told her Charles was right. This house was a burden. But something deep inside her, an intuition newly awakened by the secret will, made her unable to agree. "You know, brother," she said, trying to keep her tone as casual as possible, "I think I want to keep it for a while, just for a short time, to go through all of Dad's things. I need the time." Charles raised an eyebrow. "That's strange," he muttered. "I thought you were ready to let go. But if that's what you want," he shrugged, "just don't let it become a burden." When Charles left, a heavy sense of guilt settled on Evelyn. She was deceiving her brother, a person who had always been there for her. But she couldn't reveal this secret to him. The will had made it clear: Charles is not allowed to set foot on the property. That evening, Evelyn searched for information about Blackwood Creek. It turned out to be a small, almost forgotten town on the edge of the Appalachian Mountains. Its history was riddled with ghost stories and local legends about a powerful, mysterious family that once owned most of the land there, the Blackwood family. An old article on a local history website caught her attention. It told the story of the disappearance of a young woman named Sarah Blackwood, the granddaughter of the town's founder, who had vanished in 1950 without a trace. The case had shaken the town, but was eventually closed and forgotten. A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. 1950. That was the year her father was born. Could Sarah Blackwood's disappearance be connected to him? Was this secret will a call for her to unravel a mystery that had been buried for decades? The decision was made. She would go to Blackwood Creek, not just to fulfill her father's will, but to uncover the secrets he had tried so hard to keep. She couldn't explain why, but a strong feeling that she was being pulled towards that house, a feeling that her destiny had been decided long before she was born, took hold. The next morning, Evelyn informed Charles that she would be away for a few months. She didn't tell him where she was going. She just said she needed a change of scenery, a quiet place to deal with her emotions. Charles, though still suspicious, agreed. Evelyn packed the essentials, taking the old key she had found in a small box at the end of the will, and set off. She felt as if she was stepping into another world, a world hidden behind a curtain she had just pulled back. As she drove out of the gate, she saw Charles standing at the living room window, watching her car. His expression wasn't just concern. It was something else, something she couldn't quite identify, something like calculation. Her suspicion worsened, and a chilling thought flashed through her mind. Was Charles really the only one who didn't know about this second will? Behind her, her father's house slowly disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ahead of her, a long and ominous road stretched out, leading to Blackwood Creek, and to a house filled with secrets that Arthur Blackwood had buried with him. And she, Evelyn, was heading straight for it, alone, unaware that the truth awaiting her was far more terrifying than anything she could have ever imagined. The journey to Blackwood Creek was long and arduous, growing more ominous as Evelyn left the busy highway and drove onto narrow, winding roads that snaked through dense hills. The surrounding forest seemed to swallow her whole, the tall, bare trees obscuring the sunlight and creating a bleak, cold atmosphere. The town of Blackwood Creek was nothing short of a ghost town, a collection of old, dilapidated wooden houses and long-closed shops. It felt as if time had stopped here long ago, trapped in a past no one wanted to remember. Evelyn stopped her car in front of a tall house, hidden behind a rusted iron fence and covered in thick vines. This was the house she had seen in the will, a mysterious place tied to a strange condition. The house looked incredibly old but still intact, with large windows overlooking a derelict garden full of overgrown bushes and weeds. A shiver ran down her spine. She was in the right place. Using the old key, Evelyn unlocked the creaking iron gate. The sound echoed in the silent twilight, like a gloomy welcome from the house. The front door was also difficult to open. The smell of mold and decay rushed into her nostrils, making it hard to breathe. Everything inside the house was covered with a white canvas sheet, like a corpse wrapped in a shroud. Dust clung to every surface, but when she lifted the coverings, she saw that the furniture inside was still intact, carefully preserved as if the owner had only just stepped out. The first night passed in terrifying silence. Every little sound in the house, from the creaking of old wood to the wind whistling through the cracks in the doors, made Evelyn jump. The feeling of being watched never left her, making it impossible to sleep. She spent the entire night walking around the house, trying to find a clue, a reason for her presence here. The next day, as the sun rose, she began to explore the house more systematically. She found a locked room on the second floor. The door was secured with a sturdy lock, very similar to the ones her father had used in his study. It was then she realized that this was no ordinary house, but a labyrinth of secrets, created by a brilliant and cunning man. After breaking the lock, Evelyn stepped into the room. Unlike the other rooms in the house, this one was not covered in sheets. Instead, it was a small library, with old books piled up, photos hanging on the walls, and an oak desk. On the desk, there was a stack of old papers, tied with a yellowed string. She began to read. It was a diary, written by her grandmother, Sarah Blackwood. Page after page, it revealed a story Evelyn had never known. Sarah Blackwood was not a young woman who had mysteriously disappeared, but a person who had died tragically in a car accident. The accident had happened after a major argument between her and a wealthy man named William Caldwell over the ownership of a piece of land. Although the story had been reported in the newspapers, Evelyn realized that some details were missing. Sarah Blackwood had uncovered a horrifying secret about William Caldwell, a secret she had recorded in her diary. It was that William Caldwell had manipulated financial transactions in the town and seized the property of many residents. Sarah had discovered this and tried to expose him, but was ultimately harmed by him. Before she died, she had tried to hand over all the evidence against Caldwell to a trustworthy person. And that person was her father, Arthur Blackwood. A cold shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. Her father was not an ordinary man. He had lived with a burden, a secret, and a mission. He had tried to fulfill his promise to his mother, but he had been prevented by something. She felt a deep sympathy for the man she had thought was emotionless. Suddenly, the phone rang, startling Evelyn. It was Charles. "Evelyn," his voice said, sounding hurried. "Where are you? I've been calling you all day." "I'm in Blackwood Creek," she said, unable to hide the tension in her voice. "You're there," he said. "Why? Are you alone? Listen to me, you have to get out of there now. It's a dangerous place." "You know about Blackwood Creek?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Just some old rumors," he said. "But I told you, don't get involved in Dad's old secrets. We should leave them alone. Come back." Charles's warning made Evelyn feel that something was wrong. He wasn't just worried about her. He was trying to stop her. "No, brother," she said. "I'm not going anywhere. I need to find out the truth." "Evelyn, don't be a fool," he snapped. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Listen to me." Evelyn hung up. She couldn't trust Charles. There was something he was hiding from her, something related to Blackwood Creek and their family's secret. She had been pushed into a dangerous and difficult situation. She had discovered that her father had spent his entire life trying to fulfill his mother's mission, but he had been stopped by some force. She felt a new burden on her shoulders, a burden of truth and a new fear. She returned to the diary. The last pages told of Arthur's disappointment. He had tried to expose William Caldwell, but Caldwell was too powerful. He had threatened the Blackwood family and had succeeded in covering up his crimes. The last pages were written in a tone of despair, revealing that Caldwell had died, but his son had continued his father's work. Evelyn looked at the photos on the wall, one of which was of a young man with a slight smirk. She had seen this man somewhere. She tried to remember, but she couldn't. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door. She jumped and turned around. It was Charles. He was standing on the threshold, looking at her with a furious and somewhat panicked expression. "Evelyn, we need to talk," he said. his voice dropping to a frightening whisper. "You said not to come here," Evelyn said, feeling betrayed and panicked. "I had no other choice," he said, and stepped into the room. "You're too close to the truth. You don't understand, Evelyn. William Caldwell didn't die. He changed his name and he lived a different life. He became a wealthy and powerful man." "And who is he, you ask?" Evelyn stared at him, speechless. "He's our father," Charles said. A shock ran through her. The room seemed to tilt. Everything became meaningless. Her father was not Arthur Blackwood. He was William Caldwell, the man who had ruined her grandmother's life. The entire story of her father, of the Blackwood family, was a lie. This second will was not a call to solve an old mystery. It was a lie created to hide a far more terrible truth. It was then she realized. In the second will, there was a small line she had missed. It read, "If Evelyn does not comply, the house will be sold to a person named Charles Blackwood." Her father, or rather William Caldwell, had left a will for Charles, a will for his son, to ensure that Charles would get this house. She looked at Charles, her eyes welling with tears. "You knew all of this," she said, her voice trembling. "You knew about this second will. You knew everything." "I tried to protect you," he said, his voice tinged with remorse. "Dad told me everything. He said that you should never know the truth. He wanted you to live a normal life, but you were too curious. And now what?" Evelyn asked, her heart broken. "Now I have to protect you from yourself," he said. "You've seen too much. You know too much." He took a step towards her, and Evelyn backed away. Fear consumed her. Not because of the haunted house or the old secrets. This fear came from her own brother, the person who had always been there for her. Charles was not her ally. He was her enemy, and she had fallen into a deadly trap, set by her own father. The entire room fell into silence. The only sounds were Evelyn's heavy breathing, the frantic pounding of her heart in her chest, and Charles's approaching footsteps, each one as heavy as a threat. Charles was no longer the gentle brother she had known. His eyes were now cold, distant, a frightening void. He was William Caldwell Jr., the one who had continued his father's crimes, the one who had known all the secrets and had tried to keep them from her. "I'm not going to hurt you, Evelyn," Charles said, his voice devoid of the warmth it once held. "I just want to protect you from yourself, from the truth that Dad tried so hard to hide. He wanted us to have a normal life, a life not haunted by the past of Blackwood Creek and what the Caldwell family had done." Evelyn backed away, her hand touching the desk. She felt its solidity, her only anchor in the chaos. "Protect me?" she whispered. "You knew about all of this. You knew the second will was a trap. You knew this house was a pit to bury the truth. And you still let me come here alone, to face these horrors." "Dad left me a letter," Charles said, his voice carrying a hint of pain. "He said you were the only one with enough curiosity and courage to find the truth. He knew you would never be satisfied with lies, and he asked me to come here, to stop you, to protect you from what I've had to face all these years. You can't understand the power of the Caldwell name. Dad did everything to hide it. And you became a part of it?" Evelyn said, tears streaming down her face. "You became a Caldwell, just like Dad." Charles stopped, his face frozen. He looked into her eyes, and Evelyn saw a flicker of something in them. A conflict, a regret. But it quickly disappeared, replaced by a ruthless resolve. "There was no other way," he said. "I had to continue what Dad started. I had to keep this secret. You don't know, Evelyn. William Caldwell didn't just defraud the people here. He ruined our mother's life. Mom knew part of the truth, and that's why she was always sad, always living in fear. She tried to tell us, but Dad stopped her. And in the end, she died of sorrow, of loneliness." The room seemed to sway beneath Evelyn's feet. Not only was her father a liar, but her mother was also a victim. A wave of anger surged through her, an anger so powerful she felt she could combust. She stared at Charles, the one who had known everything, the one who had continued to protect this horrible secret, and she knew she couldn't forgive him. "I won't let this continue," she said, her voice stronger than she thought. "I'll expose everything. I'll tell everyone about William Caldwell, about what he did, about what you've done. I won't let the Blackwood family be buried in lies any longer." Charles shook his head, a cynical smile on his face. "You can't," he said. "You have no evidence. Those diaries, what you found, won't be enough. No one will believe you. They'll think you're crazy, or that you're influenced by the grief of losing your father. And I'll step forward and deny everything." Evelyn looked at the diary on the desk. He was right, maybe it wasn't enough. But she still had the second will. She still had proof of a secret's existence. But Charles was also right. The will could be dismissed. No one would believe that a wealthy and respectable man like Arthur Blackwood would leave a secret will, hidden in a Bible, for his daughter. She looked at Charles, and suddenly, another truth flashed into her mind. "The ring," she said, her voice trembling. "Mom's ring. It's gone. You took it." Charles looked at her, his face turning pale. "What are you talking about?" "Mom's wedding ring. The ring Dad gave her, the Blackwood family ring. You took it, didn't you? To sell and continue the life of a Caldwell. You took it from Dad when he died, didn't you?" Charles didn't answer. He just looked at her, his face filled with guilt and fear. Evelyn knew she was right. He wasn't just an accomplice. He was also a thief. A person who had sold the Blackwood family's legacy to continue the lavish life of a Caldwell. At that moment, Evelyn knew she couldn't continue this confrontation. Charles was too strong, too smart, and he was too used to lying. She couldn't beat him in a verbal fight. She needed to act. She looked at him, and a small, pained smile appeared on her face. "I understand, brother," she said, her voice carrying a hint of reconciliation. "I'll go. I'll leave this place, and I'll never come back. I'll forget everything I've found. I'll go back to my life." Charles looked at her, his eyes filled with suspicion. "Are you sure?" "I've had enough," she said. "I'm so tired of secrets. You can have Blackwood Creek. I don't need it. I just want a normal life." Charles nodded, and a sigh of relief crossed his face. "You've made the right decision," he said. "I'll always love you, Evelyn." When Charles left, Evelyn sat down on the floor, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe she had been deceived by her own brother. She had lost her family, lost everything she had trusted. But she hadn't given up. Her reconciliation was just a tactic. She knew that Charles would return, and she needed to be ready. She would not let these secrets be buried in the darkness. She would expose the truth, not just for herself, but for her mother, for her grandmother, and for all the people who had been ruined by the Caldwell family. The story ends here, but Evelyn's story has only just begun. She found a secret, but she lost a brother. She uncovered a horrifying truth, but she was deceived by the person she trusted most. And now she is ready to fight. She won't let her family's past be buried forever. And if you, like Evelyn, are looking for a truth, another terrifying story, another secret you want to uncover, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next stories. Join us in the search for truth, and let's uncover the secrets that have been buried.